As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
All right, hey everyone, welcome back to another Sleeping with the Numbers podcast episode. Dylan and Pat here. We're gonna talk through our power rankings today. So this is post-draft power rankings before any training camp start, any mini camp start. We're just going based off of what has happened after the draft and any news since then. There really hasn't been much. But speaking of news, couple little interesting things that we can get into here. So Tom Brady signs a 10-year broadcasting deal with Fox Sports worth $375 million. Again, over 10 years. To compare, Tom Brady's career earnings in the NFL, including this season, so 23 years, he's only made $332 million. Only. But pretty crazy how much more money he's going to get paid to do this. So, Pat, do you think he's going to be as good as Romo is?
I'm not really sure. I think that Tampa has really shown that he does have a personality outside of what we've seen from the Patriots. But
Yeah.
compared to somebody like a Romo or even John Gruden before he was canceled, I'm not really sure what Tom's going to be like. So I'd like to give it a chance. I think it'll be a good opportunity for him to sort of create his own persona, for example. I think like we've seen him with commercials and Twitter, he's kind of opened up a little bit, but I'm not really sure. I think the name itself, people will care less whether or not he's actually good and just the fact that he's there.
And I like that. Ever since he did join Tampa, he's more likable of a person. He just doesn't seem like a complete douchebag like he did when he was with the Patriots. So maybe Tom's actually a really chill dude, which he seems to be. He was at the Formula One race this past weekend with Michael Jordan, so that's kind of cool to see him getting out there, seeing some other sports legends. But yeah, I hope he does well there. It'll be fun to see, but I don't know if anyone can call a play before it happens as much as Romo can. Some other news from the South in Jacksonville: Josh Lambo, their kicker, is suing the Jaguars because of Urban Meyer's behavior. And if you don't recall, last season, not only was Urban Meyer a terrible, terrible coach, he was also a terrible, terrible person. If you do not remember the story, he ended up kicking Josh Lambo, assaulting him while on the field for whatever reason. He was probably drunk. But now Josh Lambo is suing them over that behavior. He is looking for a $3.5 million, which was his base salary, along with compensation for emotional distress. So, yeah. So, here is allegedly what Urban Meyer said to him before kicking him. He said, "Hey, dipshit, make your fucking kicks," and then kicked him. Says, "I'm the head ball coach. I'll kick you whenever the fuck I want." So just a fantastic guy, that Urban Meyer. No one could have seen that coming whenever he was hired. Just great dude all around. And, it's what Ohio State has to offer.
Do you think there's a conspiracy that the Jaguars are intentionally trying to tank so they have an excuse to move to London?
It could be. They just keep
Because I
bringing
feel like
in.
this just adds to the cake. And actually, I know I'm jumping ahead, but we get into our power rankings. I was actually going to start writing about how the Jaguars, had Sean Khan not funneled money in some illegal manner, they're the new Washington football team. Because whenever Dan Snyder gets kicked out of the league, somebody has to take that position. It's going to be them.
Yeah, flipping conferences too. Someone on there has to be a balance to the force,
Well, the Raiders are starting to get more normal. So I think that the AFC has an
True.
opening.
Yeah, who's going to be the crazy wild team now? I still think the Browns might shoot for that. Speaking of the Browns, someone posted a pretty neat graphic here on the NFL subreddit, and these are playoff appearances that have never happened. And so, looking at the AFC, the Steelers, Pat, have played every single AFC team in the playoffs except one. Any guess on what team that is?
Oh boy. Give me a second. I'm intentionally pausing. I'm not Googling, I promise.
Do you want to ask 3 questions that I can answer? We'll do like a guess who.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. Does their primary color have black in it?
No.
No. Have they been successful the past 3 seasons?
No.
Okay. I think I'm going to take a wild stab at which team the Steelers haven't played, and I'm going to say just AFC, right?
Just AFC, correct.
Is it the Dolphins?
It's not the Dolphins. We have played them. Give you one more shot here, Pat. You're in the right latitude. So it is a Southern team.
AFC Southern teams.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
You want to use your third guess who question?
Yeah, I guess so. And I apologize for my dog. She's fired up. Is it a run team? Traditionally a run heavy team?
Traditionally, I'm going to say no. And just to recap your previous questions, you first asked, was their primary color black? That was a no. And you asked if they have been successful the past 3 seasons. That is a big no. And if you look at our power rankings, that might help you out.
Is it Houston?
It is Houston.
We never played them in the playoffs?
We have never played Houston in the playoffs.
Yeah, they're not traditionally anything team.
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing I wanted to say there, I'm like, well, they had Hopkins, so I would say, they were more of a passing team at first, but then they also had was it Foster?
Arian Foster, yes.
Arian
Back
Foster.
in the day with him and Andre Johnson, right?
Yeah, yep. So yeah, the Steelers have played every AFC team in the playoffs except for the Houston Texans. So let me read off the other teams here that have never played each other in the playoffs. The Ravens have not played the Bengals, the Browns, the Jets, or Jacksonville. The Bengals have not played the Browns, the Patriots, Jacksonville, or Denver. The Browns haven't played Houston, Jacksonville, or the Chargers. Miami has also played every team except for Houston. The Jets have played every team except for Houston and Baltimore. And then along with that, Houston also hasn't played Jacksonville and Tennessee, Denver, and the Chargers. The Colts have never played Jacksonville. And then Jacksonville has also never played Kansas City, Oakland, or Las Vegas, the Raiders, or the Chargers. So some interesting things there. Looking at this, Pat, do you think there's any chance for some of these matchups? The only one I would say that is possible, I don't think Jacksonville makes it. Houston doesn't make it. Maybe we can get Cincinnati, Baltimore? That sounds like a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Cincinnati they should make the playoffs. I think Baltimore has a chance. I think that, when we get into the power ranks more, you'll see why I'm concerned about the AFC North entirely. I think that there's one clear front winner, and there's 3 other teams that could go any way possible. So I think that's possible. I think anything involving the AFC North is totally possible at this point.
I like it. Let's get into our power rankings now. Let's pause for a minute to talk about Anchor by Spotify. Anchor is an easy-to-use, one-stop shop to create and host your podcast. When we started making Sleeping with the Numbers, we used other hosts first that forced us to manually upload to Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. But with Anchor, you simply upload to a single spot, and it distributes it automatically to all of these locations. But that isn't all. With Anchor, you can easily record, edit, and even add music directly from Spotify to your podcast to make it sound even better. So if you've been waiting around to create a podcast, wait no longer, because Anchor by Spotify makes it extremely easy to do. Anchor is completely free and can be used by downloading the mobile app on iOS or Android, or even right from their website, anchor.fm. Make an account today and get podcasting. So we're going to go through all 32 teams here. A lot of these ended up in the ties just because there's only 2 people doing this. So what we ended up doing was Pat and I each made our rankings 1 through 32. and then we made a consensus ranking based on the average of both of our rankings. So we're going to talk through some of the teams, not every team, but we'll talk through the top tier teams, the bottom tier teams, and then the teams that we appear to disagree on pretty widely. So starting off, we have two Super Bowl contenders. Two teams that we consider Super Bowl contenders tied for first place between the Rams and the Bills. I have the Rams at 1, Bills at 2. Pat has the Bills at 1, Rams at 2. So Pat, maybe we just make our arguments for both of the sides here.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you want to start with the Rams?
Sure. Yeah, maybe we both make our arguments for why we have each in the number one spot. So yeah, I'll kick it off with the Rams here. So for me, it was mostly because one, they're coming off a Super Bowl win, and their team really hasn't changed that much based on the Super Bowl winning team. So yes, Von Miller has left and ironically has gone to the Bills. But I don't see that as that big of a loss. Yes, Von Miller is sure a good defensive player, but that void is not going to be that crazy of a loss. And then Robert Woods missed most of the season last season anyways, and now he's on Tennessee, actually probably as their wide receiver 1. But again, they sign Allen Robinson, who, hasn't had a great run, but I personally blame that a lot on his quarterback. So now he's coming into LA. He has Matt Stafford as his quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to do anything that spectacular, but he'll be a good number 2 in this offense. So just based on the team really has not changed that much, I find it difficult for myself to put them anywhere else but 1. And then my argument against the Bills at number 1, I still think the Bills are obviously fantastic. I have them at number 2. But my worry with them is they seem to fall apart kind of in playoffs. We've kind of seen that happen the past few years. And hopefully with the more experience they gain through these playoffs, that they will do better. I believe, Pat, both of us had them making the Super Bowl last season when we made our predictions, but they fell short of that. That's my only reason I have them down at number 2 and not at number 1.
Yeah, that's fair, and I totally have that same concern as well. So just to throw it out there, when I do my power rankings, I mean, I'm not a professional football anything. I'm going based off of gut. I'm going based off of, if I had to pick two teams on paper, who am I actually going to pick based off of what I know? So the reason I picked Buffalo is last year, the end of the season is the number 1 overall defense by PFF. And they also had the lowest rate of scoring drives in the NFL. So in terms of that, I'm saying defensively, they allowed the lowest amount of scoring rates. So as a defense, they're above elite. And I know that they got rid of defensive backs through free agency, but they also drafted Elam, and I'm willing to see what happens there. I think in this situation, Buffalo didn't really need to change a whole lot. I like the addition of Jamison Crowder. I think he's probably going to end up being better than Cole Beasley. And I think that just from what I've seen about James Cook, it's worth trying because right now Zach Moss has done nothing. Mm-hmm. So as long as they get some type of running back depth, I think that they can compete for number 1. My argument against the Rams is that, obviously they're good. They made it to the Super Bowl and won last year. I compared in the article Robert Woods and Allen Robinson. I won't get into it. You can read it if you want to. But long story short, Robert Woods was probably a better wide receiver. So I think it's almost a bit of a downgrade. And I'm really concerned about their running back room. I think if the Rams wanted to maintain that top level, they needed to go out and try to find a true number 1. Because even though Devin Singletary is not that true number 1, Josh Allen's their number 1. Matt Stafford could not carry that load. So until one of those guys, Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, someone like that steps up, the Rams are fairly one-dimensional, and that's what concerns me about them on offense.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that their running back room right now is Cam Akers, who started off pretty good, shocked everyone coming back from that Achilles injury, but really disappointed, honestly, in playoffs. They still got the win, of course, but did not look great. Second string right now is Darrell Henderson, and Sony Michel actually just signed with the Dolphins. So they are a little lacking at the running back in terms of depth, and they always seem to have injuries there, much like their divisional much like their divisional rivals, the 49ers, who also always have running back injuries. So it's not easy to stay healthy as a running back, but I don't know if you want your number one guy to be someone who's only a year off of an Achilles injury. So yeah, I could see it either way. Honestly, this would be a fantastic Super Bowl matchup and one that would be fun to see. But it remains to be seen. I can see both of these guys at number one in the power rankings moving forward for the whole season. Our next section here, we have called them great teams. First off here, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are tied for third. I have them at 3. Pat has them at 5. Also tied for third is the Los Angeles Chargers. I have them at 5. Pat has them at 3. And I don't think we can talk enough about the Chargers. I am a massive fan for them. The real reason I have them down at 5 and not up here with you, Pat, is the fact that Brady is back with basically his whole team healthy. Gronk may or may not be there, but he really didn't do that much for me to be super concerned. And then Kansas City, I found it shocking to myself that I have them so high up. And personally, after week 1, I think I'm going to end up shooting them downwards. But until I see their decline, I have the Chiefs at number 4. Pat, you have them at 6, meaning they are tied for 5th. So, out of these teams in the great team section, who are you most confident with? And I guess the other team we'll add in here that's also tied for 5th is the Cincinnati Bengals. I have them at 6. Pat, you have them at 4. So I guess out of that group, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Chargers, Tampa Bay, who do you have the most confidence in this season?
By confidence, I'm going to say who is more likely to actually step up. It's probably going to be the Bengals, and I hate to say that. I think if you had to tell me to pick a team on that I'm going to ride with to the Super Bowl, it's going to be the Chargers. And like I said, I'm going to keep plugging this. I write about it in the article. The Chargers last year fell apart. They had the most points scored on them in the AFC West, 459 points. How many points less do you think was scored on the number 1 team, which was Denver?
I'm going to say probably 60-something.
130.
Holy shit.
So, what do we think the problem is with the Chargers? Well, that's why they went and signed J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack. So, we're going to find out if that works. And if not, they at least got Zion Johnson to help protect Justin Herbert. Yeah. So, I'm going to wait on the Chargers. They're that team that, that's the shiny new toy. They're like Teslas when it comes to cars. I want to love Teslas. They look great. Now, am I going to trust this Tesla more than my Subaru? Probably not. So I'm going to take the Bengals. For me, the Bengals didn't do anything wrong, and that's the reason that I'm going to keep them alive as my number 1 most consistent team in terms of these great teams. But I also think that they have the best division to succeed. They have the best opportunity to get the number 1 seed overall. And honestly, when it comes to the Bengals, I thought that they were going to be good last year. They arguably have the best receiver group out of these teams. Yeah. They arguably have a good quarterback. He's not the best, but he's definitely up there in the discussion. Probably have the second best running back behind Eckler. And honestly, I mean, their defense was great last year for what they had. So they bother me because there's nothing wrong with them. I don't know if you agree with that.
What I put in the article was much like the Steelers, I was disappointed that they didn't address their offensive line sooner. They waited until the 4th round to take a rookie that is really unlikely to even start this season. And when you're in the AFC North, and I say this about the Ravens, and I said it about the Steelers, all these teams, they're going up against great defensive players. TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Justin Houston. They're going to be going against these guys at least 6 times a season. So my biggest fear for the Bengals is still their horrid offensive line because they really didn't do much to improve it.
So just to jump in, just to counterpoint, Now, do you think La'el Collins is going to help at all? Because they did get him from Dallas. And I know that obviously they didn't draft somebody, and La'el Collins was not super consistent with Dallas. But do you think that that's enough to help, or are you concerned that they don't have a future?
Enough to help. So this is much like what the Steelers did, right? They're grabbing some veterans that maybe are not the best, but it's better than the young guys that we have. So sure, it helps, but the rest of their line, especially on the left side of the line, the blind side, I fear for Joe Burrow's life. That's really what it comes down to.
And that's fair enough. I was just curious.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's a good point. But it's the same deal. Steelers did the same shit. You know, we're grabbing these veteran players that weren't wanted by their initial team. Well, Collins is a bit older, so that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I honestly don't know what to expect from
I will
these
say
Lions.
that with James Daniels, just going off the Steelers for a second, I do have word from a confirmed Bears fan that he actually enjoyed James Daniels, so it makes me feel better.
I'm just surprised that you know a Bears fan.
He doesn't talk about it much.
Yeah, I
so
wouldn't either.
yes, he usually starts the sentence by "I'm from Illinois," and then about 10 hours later, it's like, "By the way, I watch the Bears."
Oh no. Poor guy. Yeah, we will get to them very late in this episode. So that does it for the great teams, and you may be surprised to not hear the Green Bay Packers name under the great teams. We have them under the good teams. Pat, you and I both have them ranked 7, and that's where they end up, number 7. Also in the good teams, Dallas Cowboys tied for 8. I have them at 8. Pat, you have them at 12. Ravens are there tied for 8 as well. We both have them at 10. Denver Broncos are coming in at number 10. I have them at 14. Pat, you have them at 8. 49ers at 11. I have them at 9. You have them at 14. So, Pat, let's talk about the teams that we have a decent discrepancy in. And let's start with the Broncos, because I think that's one that has a lot of hype around them. The 49ers have kind of always been everywhere because they were personally hard to rank on my side. But the Denver Broncos, they get Russell Wilson, and now everyone thinks they are the best team ever. I have them here at 14. Pat, you have them at 8. Persuade me.
So, last year, Denver gave up the third fewest points per game. With, do you remember who their starting quarterback was?
Drew Lock?
Neither do I.
Or Teddy Bridgewater?
Yeah, whoever,
Yeah.
right? So, Denver was competitive with nobody on offense. Remember, however many wide receivers were hurt as well. They're getting Russell Wilson, who you and I both agree he's not elite like everybody else likes to talk about, right? But you're getting a complete upgrade at quarterback, and you're getting most of your receiving quarterback. Noah Fant, for all the people concerned that he got traded to Seattle, never scored more than 4 touchdowns in the season. Now, granted, he was being thrown the ball by a clown, but if you're that good, you still catch more than that. Noah Fant was always injured. That was his problem. That has nothing to do with the quarterback. So for me, what I'm looking at is you have a good good running back duo, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. You have an up-and-coming wide receiver core, not as good as Cincinnati's, but comparable. Russell Wilson's an established playoff quarterback. So I think that they have the offense needed to be safe. And defensively, they didn't really change anything. So I'm looking at this team where, in paper, do I like the Chargers better? Yes. Do I think the Chiefs have more, I guess, firepower in terms of Mahomes? Because that's really what we're talking about at this point because Tyreek Hill's gone. Yes, they do. Do the Raiders have some more firepower now that they got Devontae Adams? Yes. But what do the Broncos have? They actually have a defense unlike the rest of these teams in this division. That's where they're going to make their bread. So even though I have them as 8, they might get second in the division. But what I'm saying is they will be highly competitive in this division and should be able to slow a lot of other teams down.
So my rebuttal is going to be this. Looking at their wins last year, Pat, do you think the Giants are a good team?
Absolutely not. You'll find that out later.
Do you think the Jags are a good team?
I think they're the team that I root for in terms of chaos, but yes. No, I'm just kidding. They're horrible.
The Jets?
Maybe now.
Last season.
Oh, last season? I mean, did Zach Wilson throw more? He threw 9 touchdowns, right?
He was injured a lot of it. They had, I think
Yeah.
Flacco was their quarterback most of the time.
I think Mike White
Oh yeah,
will get
yeah.
a statue put out in front of the Meadowlands for years to come.
And then Detroit last year.
I love the energy. Loved the energy.
Because those were their wins. The other 2 wins that I will respect them for are against the Cowboys and the Chargers. Other than that, they beat the Giants, the Jags, the Jets, the Washington football team, and the Detroit Lions. So they still lost against okay teams. I'm not going to say the Steelers were the best team. They lost to them. They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Raiders, the Browns, Philly, Kansas City, Bengals, Raiders, Chargers again, and then Chiefs again. So a lot of these divisional wins, how many did they have? They had one. They had one win out of the 6 games they played in their division. I personally think their division is still very competitive. We talked about the Chargers. We think they're great. Kansas City, yes, maybe they can get up there and compete for that second spot. Raiders, I don't know. I like them, but is the addition of Russell Wilson enough to have them win both times they played? Because they lost both times last season. So I don't know. I'm not fully there. I like Jerry Jeudy. I like Cortland Sutton even more. I like their running back group, probably the best. Javonte and Melvin Gordon re-signed. So I still think they might have an identity crisis where before last year, they were one of the best run teams because they had to be. Drew Lock can't pass the ball. Teddy Bridgewater can't pass the ball. So they had to hand off the ball to Javonte or Melvin. And they did a fantastic job with that. And when you're coming into this season after doing so well in the run game, and Russell just left Seattle, and all Pete Carroll wanted to do was run the ball, that was a decent reason why Russell wanted to leave. He wanted to, as they say, cook. They wanted Russ to cook. And I don't know if the coaching staff of the Broncos want to do that. And if they're unsure, I think they're going to force themselves into more passing plays to appease Russell Wilson, who they just traded the world for. So my worry is I think they can be a very, very good team, but I don't think the way of doing it is trying to become Russell Wilson's team. I think he is a key piece, but you cannot revolve this entire team around him. He isn't that player anymore in my mind. We got here. Second, so the other team here in this group, Pat, that we were pretty wide on was San Francisco 49ers. They end up as our consensus 11th ranked team. I have them at 9, which is shocking to me because I'm not really a 49ers fan. Pat, you have them at 14. But, as I look through it, they get it done. Kyle Shanahan finds ways to win this game. Debo's going to be here. It sounds like he added them back to his social media or whatever. He's a fantastic player. Now, the question for me becomes the quarterback. I don't know what their plan is. If I had to guess right now and make a bet, I would say Trey Lance is going to be the guy on week 1. They're really trying to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, but nobody wants to take that big contract. So more likely that they'll cut him before the season starts and they'll end up saving $25.5 million in cap space. Pat, I honestly don't think our reasoning here is going to be too different from each other. We just ended up with different rankings.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm looking at Debo, and I'm afraid of a progression as what we will see with Cordero Patterson and some of these other guys who are those jet sweep running back fake guys, right? And when I say fake, I mean they don't have a position. What happened to Le'Veon Bell after a few years? He eventually got cold. So I guess my concern with him is that if I'm looking at his previous years, he didn't rush for more than 159 yards until this year where he got 365 and he got 8 touchdowns. Whereas in previous years, he's only scored 3 total. He didn't score any rushing touchdowns in 2020. And as a receiver, he didn't top 1,000 yards until this year. So, like, obviously, it takes receivers some time to get up there in terms of development. But what's going to happen when Jimmy G gets benched? Are we going to assume that Debo is going to get the same type of consistency? Because I don't think that's the case. I haven't seen enough of Trey Lance to feel confident in that. Same thing with what's going on with the running back room. Who's their running back? They have like 30 on the roster. 80 of them are on the IR. I don't even know at this point. And looking around, I mean, I'm just really concerned that the 49ers are just going to be too inconsistent. It's going to be what happened basically this year with the Falcons. They're going to try to put a huge reliance on Debo, as the Falcons did with Patterson. And it completely collapsed in the second half of the season because teams are like, oh, well, there's the guy. We're just going to go block him.
Yes.
That's why I put them at 14. If they can remain functional and healthy, they're a much better team than that. But I'm looking at this from the perspective of over the course of the season, what do I think is going to happen?
Yeah, and that's completely fair. And like I said, I think we have the same ideas here about the team. I just think our rankings ended up a little different, which is absolutely fine. I'm shocked I have the San Francisco 49ers ranked as highly as I do. People have a ton of faith in them, and they always end up being like a decent odd shot at the Super Bowl winner, you know, when the odds come out and everything. And I'm just always so surprised when those odds come out with just how high they are, because they never get to it. And I don't know why it never changes or who's making these odds, but they are almost always disappointing in terms of what is expected of them. So I'm pulling open the Super Bowl odds at the moment. And okay, so let's play a game, Pat. I'm going to name a team, and you tell me if they have better odds to win the Super Bowl than the 49ers. Let's start with the Bengals.
I'm going to say the Bengals have probably surprisingly lower, even though it should be higher.
That is correct. So the Bengals are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4 spots below the 49ers.
That's crazy.
Chargers.
I would say higher.
Nope. San Francisco is 1 spot above them. Plus 1494 to plus 1600. The Packers.
Lower.
The Packers are the 4th highest odds to win the Super Bowl at plus 1,000. 49ers at plus 1494. Wow.
Where are these odds from?
These are consensus
is this some type
odds.
Is this the clown casino? What is
it? Is
maybe these will be updated in 6 months.
This is DraftKings.
Oh, well.
We
use Monkey Knife Fight.
let me throw you another team here. The Rams.
They have to be higher, right?
They are by 1 spot.
Okay. That's ridiculous.
And the Rams are currently the 5th in odds right now to win the Super Bowl.
Is the favorite Buffalo?
It is. Buffalo.
Okay, so Buffalo's not going to win the Super Bowl this year. It's probably I'm going to guess the top 5, not looking.
Sure. In order or
Buffalo.
any order?
I'll try to go in order, but I'll probably be wrong. So you told me that the Rams are 5th.
Yes.
Buffalo's number 1.
Yes.
Number 2 is probably Tampa.
Yes.
Number 3 is probably, oh boy. Is it the Chiefs?
It is. One more.
Okay. Who would be number 4 out of this entire group? There's no way it's going to be the Indianapolis Colts. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Geographically,
I have no idea about 4's tough. Geographically, I'm close?
Yeah. I think. I'm not that good at geography.
Chicago? No.
Well, you got the right division.
Oh, not the Bengals.
No.
Oh, you said NFC North?
Yeah.
Wait, the Vikings?
No.
Packers. You said this.
Yeah.
Man, I guess I had the answer and I lost it. All right,
so
whatever.
Bills plus 650, Bucks plus 750, Chiefs plus 974. That's weird. Packers plus 1,000, Rams plus 1,100.
So all the fair weather teams right now are top 5, and then we'll play one game, and then it'll all switch.
Gonna go to shit. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
It's gonna be the Jaguars number 1.
They're 1-0. Everyone sees just how good Trayvon Walker is.
Yes.
Oh God,
he will be starting at quarterback week 2.
He might be better. All right, let's get into some of these average teams. Average teams, we're going to start it off with the Indianapolis Colts here at number 12. I have them at 15. Pat, you have them at 11. Eagles, I have them at 11. Pat, you have them at 16 for a consensus ranking of 13. Cardinals, who we will stop and talk about here in a little bit, we have them at 14, but I have them at 20 and Pat has them at 9. So we're going to discuss them in a second here. Raiders tied for 15. I have them at 13. Pat at 17. Steelers tied for 15. I have them at 17. Pat has them at 13. Tennessee Titans tied for 17th. I have them at 12. Pat has them at 19. We will also discuss them a little bit. Patriots tied for 17. I have them at 16. Pat at 15. Vikings at 19. We both have them at 18. Browns at 20. I have them at 19. Pat has them at 20. Saints tied for 21. I have them at 21. Pat has them at 22. Miami Dolphins also tied for 21st. I have them at 22. Pat has them at 21. So let's back up here and talk about some of these discrepancies that we have. The biggest one in this entire thing being the Cardinals. So I have them down at 20. Pat, you have them at 9 in the top 10. So I had you defend Denver before. I'll try to defend my feeling on the Cardinals here.
Fair enough.
Because I have them quite low, which I hate to see. So I'm going to read my first paragraph here for the article. I need to clear my name by first saying I fully love the Arizona Cardinals, and they're one of my favorite teams behind my beloved Steelers. That being said, Arizona is in a spot of trouble here. They have had problems stemming from last season. Kyler was all pissy coming into the offseason, had a little hissy fit, removed the Cardinals from his social media because that's apparently the thing now for like our generation, Pat. I don't really get what that does, but that seems to be the thing. They all do this. They all remove.
Well, I think that you have a bunch of agents who are, I hate to say this, but what's the age demographic under millennials? Is it Gen Z? Is that what we're talking about? Either way, fuck them. Because here's what they like to do. They like to post on TikTok. And I'm talking as if I'm like older and out of like the millennial category, right? But they have no concept of what it means to diss somebody. Michael Jordan returned to basketball through a fax machine. Nobody cares if you unfollow somebody on Instagram or whatever it was, right?
So
they're all just trying to get attention. Everyone's trying to get a moment on Instagram.
We have a pretty big gap for millennials. So millennials are from 1981 to 1996. Gen Z is 97 to 2012. So Kyler's a millennial, isn't he?
Who is?
Kyler Murray.
I don't know. He might be on the cusp because is he not younger than us?
Kyler Murray was born in 97. So, okay, he's right at the beginning of Gen Z. Yeah, but that's the whole thing. Everyone does this now, and it's just super annoying. So Kyler's pissed off to start the offseason. And then everyone wanted them to draft a wide receiver. They instead trade for Hollywood Brown, which by itself is a decent trade. That helps them out a good bit. But I also feel like this trade happened because they knew DeAndre Hopkins was about to get suspended for 6 games. So DeAndre Hopkins missed a lot of last season as well. And without him, they did very, very poorly. So let me just actually pull up the stats here for when Hopkins left, and we can kind of compare their win-loss since. Because they started off hot. They were a Super Bowl favorite. So let's see. Hopkins got hurt from week 9 to week 13. last season. So looking at the Cardinals and how they performed in that time span. So from weeks 1 through 8, I should say, they were 7-1. They went on a 7-game win streak and lost against the Packers. That so happened to be the game that Hopkins also got injured. Their next set of games from week 9 to 13, they went win-loss against the Niners and the Panthers, 2 wins against Seattle and the Bears. And then honestly, they went on a losing streak. And this was after Hopkins actually came back. So he was obviously not fully healthy. They lose against the Rams. They lost against Detroit really badly. They lost against the Colts, get a win out of the Cowboys, lose again against the Seattle Seahawks, and then they lose to the Rams in playoffs. So that is a worry to me. That is a hot start that they had, 7-1, with DeAndre Hopkins before he went down. And that seemed to just be like the straw that broke the camel's back. So that has me worried there. Can Hollywood end up as the wide receiver 1? I think he has a fantastic opportunity. But behind him, who's there? 90-year-old AJ Green again? So that's my worry. Is just I don't know how they really get it done. James Conner's there in the backfield alone, which is interesting. But Pat, I think you and I both know he can't do that by himself.
I think that's where I disagree. So again, another plug. If you read the article, you'll find out how I feel about James Conner. You'll also learn that he outscored Chase Edmonds last year 18-2 in terms of total touchdowns. Why are we talking about Chase Edmonds? Not only did he only score 2 touchdowns, who do you think had the higher yards per reception? Is James Conner a receiving back?
When he was in Pittsburgh for a little bit, yeah. But no, I would say say Edmonds was his receiving back. Yes.
James Conner 10.1 yards per reception. Chase Edmonds 7.2.
How many receptions?
So we don't need him. I think James Conner got more because obviously he played more.
Gotcha.
But regardless, Chase Edmonds can go to Miami. It'll be fine. Mm-hmm. He can go to the Island of Misfit Toys with Raheem Mostert, Sony Michel, and whoever else you want to get from Madden 2019 that you thought was going to be good as a rookie, right? My entire point is that Marquise Brown is better than Christian Kirk.
Yes.
Kyler actually posted a higher QBR last year than Josh Allen, which is shocking to me. I did not know that by watching the team. And you're right, I think losing DeAndre Hopkins is scary for this team, but I think that in terms of the overall team itself, when I'm looking at power rankings, again, I'm picking off a base off. If I'm picking somebody on paper, I'm going to take James Conner, who showed that he can get the ball in the end zone no matter what. Marquise Brown should have an explosive year. Kyler's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And their defense was solid. So, for me, I'm looking at a team that I don't think they're going to crash next year. Because what we also forget is that wasn't Kyler hurt last year as well for a little bit?
Yeah. He couldn't run.
Okay, so and that's my whole entire point. If you have a healthy Arizona Cardinals team, I think they can compete with anybody. Now, DeAndre Hopkins makes that harder, but when I'm looking at power rankings, I'm not going to drop them 11 spots because of DeAndre Hopkins. That's just my logic.
Yeah, that's fair. And I want to reiterate, I want the Cardinals to succeed. I really like them. But to kind of go back to the James Conner doing it on his own thing, I kind of made this point in the draft article we wrote. So Conner had 15 rushing touchdowns last season, which I believe was the most he's ever had. 12 of those 15 were from under 10 yards away. 8 of those were from just the 1 yard line. And then to give you a reference here, there have been 3,300 total rush attempts from the 1 yard line since 2010. And 54.5% of them resulted in a touchdown. It doesn't require a good offensive line or a good running back even. It's just very difficult for a defense to prevent a single yard from being gained. So to kind of counteract that, he's always going to be the goal line guy. He's very, very good at it. But between the 20s, he has problems. he was only able to get 3.81 yards per carry, which was about 15% than the league average of 4.49 yards per carry between the 20. So again, I worry about how much he can take there. You talk about his yards per reception, but I'm curious how often they're going to be throwing him the ball versus handing it to him. Pat, the other team here that we have a bit of a difference on is the Tennessee Titans, consensus ranked at 17. I have them at 12. You have them at 19. So I've made my arguments for the Cardinals. Let's hear your thoughts on the Titans, because I think I agree.
I never thought A.J. Brown was that great. Like, in terms of, he was a good number one wide receiver, but like, I could probably name 10 other wide receivers I'd rather have, right? I think my logic is, you just committed Derrick Henry to have to go to complete and utter chaos mode in order for this team to succeed, because you have an older Ryan Tannehill, you have no true number one wide receiver, and basically everything else is kind of falling apart at this point in time. So this is a situation that the Colts were in last year with Jonathan Taylor. Now, if you have Derrick Henry on your fantasy team, or you have the opportunity to draft him, please draft him this year. That's what needs to happen. But if you're putting money on the Titans to be successful, I don't see it happening, because I think teams are going to realize if we stop Derrick Henry, we stop the Titans. And when I'm looking at this, I don't know. Everyone wants to say Treylon Burks is the next A.J. Brown. Well, I've also heard plenty of other wide receiver comparisons that never pan out. Just because someone's the same height doesn't mean that they're the same player. So, to my logic, I'm really concerned that the Titans are going to be one-dimensional and they're going to get shut down. Even drafting Malik Willis, if the Titans start going sub 500, Ryan Tannehill's going to get benched, regardless of how good he's playing. I don't care how much money they're paying him. The fans are going to want Malik Willis because he was overly hyped. Even though he's a third-round draft pick, he was overly hyped as a first-round potential pick, and that's what the fans think. So I see this team going into disaster mode very quickly. Fortunately, they're in a bad division, but I just don't trust them to be balanced enough to be competitive.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. Coming into the season, I again saw them as a possible Super Bowl contender. They had everything right, but I think we found that Derrick Henry is human. He had his first major injury that caused him to miss a lot of the season. He was able to come back in playoffs, but it really didn't matter too much. So with that, and then you remove A.J. Brown from the equation, you draft Treylon Burks, who I think is a solid replacement, but it might take him some time to grow into that role. And then you have Robert Woods there now, who is just always injured and everything. And then Tannehill, who's aging, they have an out. To your point, Pat, they have an out in his contract next season. And I'm curious what they do there. You know, are they going to continue paying him the big money? Or will, like you said, it turn to the fans and be like, yeah, let's get Malik in there. And there already seems to be some anger between the two. Tannehill said it's not his job to train him, which I fully disagree with. And I think that's kind of a shitty thing to say, honestly, as a veteran player like that. I'll compare it to Ryan Fitzpatrick. These young guys love playing with Ryan Fitzpatrick because they learn so much from him. You know, he's obviously played a bit more than Ryan Tannehill, but they still want to learn from these veteran guys. You know, they've watched them play forever. So for Tannehill to kind of come in and say that's a little shitty. But, you know, whatever. We'll watch them battle it out during the season. But they have removed themselves from playoff talks, from my mouth at least, until they can show me something different. The big thing that keeps me somewhat of a believer is their head coach, Mike Vrabel. I think he is a fantastic coach. He obviously is a good coach. He won Coach of the Year last year. But I think he will be able to keep his team centered, at least for a bit. And then he's going to run out of talent down the line because, like you said, once they figure out, hey, all we got to do is block Derrick Henry and we win, you know, I think teams have been trying that for a while, but Henry's aging. He's going to be 29 this season, which is right around where running backs fall off a cliff. So I am worried about the Titans. even if my rank doesn't really say that, I do worry about them. Getting back into it, scrolling down the other team that we had discrepancy on that we want to talk about here, the last one before we hit into the dirty discussing bad teams, is the Philadelphia Eagles. I thought the Eagles did a lot of good work this offseason, and the big thing to me is it tells me they're actually confident starting Jalen Hurts going forward. I didn't think they were. It seemed like they didn't want him to be the guy. They were always trying to get rid of him. But I think he has a pretty solidified spot now going forward. So the Eagles consensus rank of 13. I have them at 11. Pat, you have them at 16. They go out and grab AJ Brown, who we just talked about from Tennessee. And that honestly plays a big part in my ranking because before they didn't really have a ton of receiving weapons. It was Smith and really no one else. But now they get AJ Brown. Jalen Reagor's all pissed off. Now he's removing the Eagles from his social media, but he was never good to begin with. So I think that gets him a lot more help. And Pat, you'll be surprised maybe to hear that what team ran the most last season? Tennessee or Philadelphia? The two teams.
I think it's Philadelphia because I remember looking at the stat. Philadelphia was number 2. Baltimore was number 1.
51 rush attempts. The Philadelphia Eagles had 550, so only one fewer. Baltimore was in third with we got 33 less attempts than the Eagles. So they want to run the ball. And now I'm curious if they won't run the ball as often with their new weapon. So Pat, what are your thoughts on the Eagles here? I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they beat out Dallas this season for first.
I wouldn't either. I think what I'm really concerned about is that they're the Buffalo Bills light. And the reason that I say that is they have an athletic quarterback who's not as good as Josh Allen. They have one really good wide receiver, A.J. Brown compared to Stephon Diggs. And they don't have a running back room. And I think that's where I'm really concerned is that the Bills get away with stuff because Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are a great tandem. Right. And they also have Dawson Knox as well. Granted, the Eagles have Dallas Goedert, but he's not the same. So looking at that offense, I'm really concerned that A.J. Brown, it doesn't matter if he gets the ball because it's going to be the same problem they kind of had in Tennessee is, okay, so A.J. Brown's the number 1 wide receiver. Who's after that? I don't really know who it is. Are we going to start the season with Boston Scott as the running back or Miles Sanders or any of these other guys? I think that's where I'm a little lost. Now, they did add some pieces to help on defense, but I don't think it matters. And I guess that's why I put the Eagles so low is when I look at their total offense, I'm like, okay, A.J. Brown was a top 20 wide receiver in terms of like dangerousness. Jalen Hurts is not a top 10 quarterback. So it sounds great on paper, but I'm really concerned. And I guess the same argument can be made for that they're a lighter version of the Cardinals.
Yeah, both birds.
Fantastic correlation.
Yeah, no, the biggest plus I think I can give the Eagles is that they are in a bad division. So it's not difficult for a team to take over here. We kind of always expected it to be Dallas, but honestly, Dallas has been disappointing. They keep throwing money in the wrong places, and I don't know what this season's going to yield for them. I'm not impressed with Dak. I don't care about his injuries anymore. It's just he hasn't done it. People can show me the splits all they want. Well, this is how they performed with Dak, and this is how they did without, and they're so much better with Dak. Yeah, because their backups are shit. Of course they're not going to be as good. He is their centerpiece, and even Zeke is now declining. So I think there's a fantastic opportunity for the Eagles to kind of take hold here. So, go Birds. Getting into the bad teams here, the Washington Commanders come in at a consensus rank of 23. I have them at 23. Pat, you have them at 24. Panthers tied for 24th. I have them at 25. Pat, you have them there as well. The Jets tied for 24. I have them at 27. Pat, you have them at 23. Seattle Seahawks at 26. I have them at 24. Pat at 27. Detroit comes in at 27. We both have them at 26. So, out of this group, it seems like there's a mixture, right? There's a mixture of teams that are going downhill, but also some teams that are moving up. And I think one of those teams is the Jets, Pat. So the Jets have always kind of been bottom feeders here, but I really think that they're making the right moves to turn themselves around.
Yeah, I agree. I think that their prospects that, for the most part, people were like, you can't miss this. Now, obviously, I'm not an NFL scout. I'm not an NFL quote-unquote expert. But I kind of agree. At some point, if your team's that bad, the guys you draft have to be better, right? So if I'm looking at this, they had the worst defense, giving up the most yards per game and the most points against. There is no way you can't find anybody better than that group that you fielded last year. No effing way. So, assuming that, I'm going to give them an extra 4 spots on the power ranking just because they're trying to fix their defense. They got Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson. They're trying to make something work. And at some point, Zach Wilson has to develop. Like, I think you and I agreed. Like, we looked at him last year and we're like, okay, his stats don't make a lot of sense, but when we watch him play in the games of the rookie quarterbacks, he was the one we're like, okay, that looks somewhat competent.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope that last year was just a bad team. Hopefully this year they should be on the up and up. Fortunately for them, or unfortunately, I guess to clarify, is that their division's horrible in a good sense. Like, they will likely be last again. But that's okay, because eventually they'll take over. So I think that the Jets will move up, and the power ranking's higher than when it was last year, I don't expect them to win 9 games, but I expect them to be competitive in their division, and I also expect for them to be competitive in all games to the point where we're like, okay, this is better than last season's team. And to me, that's an improvement.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway for them was, like you said, their division is tough. Not so much overall, but they are locked down by the Bills. And I think they're going to be locked down by the Bills for quite a while. So, it's really just competing for second place here. The Patriots and Bill Belichick always find a way to win games. So, I think they can see beating out Miami as a win. And I think it can be done. They're a very, very young team, and I think they'll be doubted because of who they are. But Miami, I don't see as that crazy amount better. Ooh, they got Tyreek Hill. I don't care. A lot of what made Tyreek Hill was Patrick Mahomes. Tua's not going to have that same connection. They're not going to be that same kind of offense. Jalen Waddle is there, and honestly, Jalen Waddle should still be the wide receiver 1. So I like the Jets. I think their trajectory is looking good. I hope they do well this season and continue to grow on that. But overall, fantastic draft. They get the best cornerback in the draft. They get a top 3 wide receiver with Garrett Wilson. And then they get an awesome edge rusher in Jermaine Johnson very, very late in the first. So that was really a steal. They also end up drafting, why can't I remember his name? Breece Hall. And good for them. They're very young, like I said, but they are going to grow together. And when you get that strong core of a group, think about the Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, the Patrick Mahomes. They were together forever. We might be seeing the early stages of something like that. Now, moving on to the very worst of the worst teams. In this category, we're starting off with the Jacksonville Jaguars, tied for 28th. Pat, you and I both have them at 29. Atlanta Falcons are also tied for 28th. I have them at 30. Pat, you have them at 28. The Giants, Pat, you have them dead last at 32. I have them at 28. And then the Bears, I have them in last place. Pat, you have them at 30. And then the Texans, they're also tied for 31st, which is basically last with the Bears. We both have them at 31. So, Pat, maybe we talk about our lowest ranked team here and why we have them as such. So you have the Giants here ranked last for you. Why is that?
Well, again, last plug, and I'll stop talking about it. If you go to the article and check it out, and Really, I think you should because it gives you more in-depth knowledge compared to what we've talked about tonight. I really fucking hated Eli Manning. And that's not relevant to the team at all. But I've always hated the Giants. I think that they're a joke. I think that they're a mess. And last year, do we know how many wide receivers actually survived the season?
Oh, God.
So, here's my logic. Regardless if they get Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal, fantastic. All right. Is it going to matter? Probably not, because you don't have a true number one wide receiver. Do we really think that Kenny Golladay is the number one?
No, not anymore.
No. Kenny Golladay, he was great for the Lions back when he had to be, but he's not. Sterling Shepard, I looked this up. He hasn't played a full season the past 3 years. And he was supposed to be their number one, right?
Yeah.
And then Daniel Jones was projected to be traded or released or whatever. It's going to happen next year. We know this, regardless of the situation. They're going to get rid of him because when a fan base gives up on somebody like that, for the most part, they're gone. So I think looking at this, I project this to be a Raiders / Washington / probably Jacksonville-esque season where regardless of how good their record ends up being, it's going to be a dumpster fire. Saquon Barkley, and I think you can agree this as a Penn State fan, he has not lived up to the hype, and I don't think it's necessarily his fault, but when you get hurt in the manner which he did, that's hard to come back from, especially on a bad team. So I just think they're going to remain a laughingstock. And when I look at them as the power ranking, do I think that they're actually the worst team on paper? No. But I will never put any money on them because I have no idea who's going to be healthy. Kadarius Toney was going to get traded, even though he was touted as a great draft pick, and he hasn't even played half the year. So why are we going and getting Wandell, what's his face, from Kentucky? If you guys think that Kadarius Toney is the future, if you think that Kenny Golladay is the number one, if you think Sterling Shepard's going to be healthy, why'd you get rid of Evan Ingram?
Yeah.
What are they doing? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, they're another team with a crisis. I don't think their coaching is very good. I don't think their front office is very good. I'm giving one more chance for Barkley to stay healthy and see what he can do, because quite honestly, if he cannot get it done this season, that may very well be his career.
You're going to have to change your dog's name to Miles at this point because he's the only Penn State running back left.
I might go with Parsons. I kind of like that. Man, it really is disappointing to see. After that first season he had with Eli Manning, we're like, we're witnessing history here with Saquon Barkley, and then the ACL tears, and it's just bad ligament damage. Now, one thing to note there, he is not human. It seems like he recovers stupid quick, but it really doesn't matter because the offense as a whole does not click. It's very similar to, I guess we can compare it to kind of like Tennessee. You know where the ball is going to go, but Tennessee at least has a competent offense that can kind of help out Derrick Henry. Saquon does not. Evan Neal, maybe he helps a little bit up front just because he's a massive body. But like you said, who the fuck are they throwing the ball to? And the problem may actually be Daniel Jones. He's another guy. If he doesn't, they decline his 5th-year option, and he might end up going the way of Baker, where nobody wants him. He'll get a spot somewhere as a backup, but his starting career may or may not be coming to an end. So Giants, yeah, I'm with you, Pat. I don't have them ranked last, but they might as well be. For my last ranked team, I have the Chicago Bears. The reason I have them ranked this way, one, I've never been a believer in Justin Fields. If you've listened to any of our podcasts last season, you would know that. I don't believe in Ohio State quarterbacks. You can blame Urban Meyer if you want to. That's certainly fair. But none of them fare well in the NFL. I don't know if it's like the scheme they play that it just doesn't translate over to the professionals. But he's not going to be able to get it done, and the team is not helping him. They're not trying to help him get it done. I think they want him out, honestly, because they have a new coaching regime that did not draft Fields. So I honestly do not think that they are committed to him. and are looking for different options. Now, for their depth chart here at wide receiver, they got rid of Allen Robinson. And then they ended up, I think they took, no, I'm thinking of Green Bay. Never mind. So their starting wide receiver right now is Darnell Mooney. Oh boy. Quamius St. Brown. And then Byron Pringle. And I think Byron Pringle just got arrested. Did he not?
I'm not really sure. Let me double check that for you while you're talking.
Yeah, check that out. I'm pretty sure he got in some trouble. So he's going to be suspended probably for some games. So their best player is David Montgomery, who I really like. He gets the ball a lot. He'll be solid running back 2 type for fantasy. But out of that, they got nobody on this team to help them out. And which is sad because honestly, if they build it up a bit more, I see Green Bay kind of coming back down to earth, and maybe they have a chance to kind of leapfrog some of these teams in their division, but they have no help. And because of that, I have no choice but to put them last.
Okay, so I'm not going to play it, but not live footage. Dash cam footage of the cops pulling
I see it.
Byron Pringle. Oh, he looks a little. Oh, he's finger banging the cop. That's not a good sign. That could be assault with deadly weapon. He has an orange Charger, so you obviously know at this point in time he's definitely a douchebag. He looks a little pudgy for a wide receiver too. He's just being really shitty. Like the cops just trying to hold his hands, say, "Sir, let me put you into some handcuffs," and Byron's staring back at him. But what I don't understand is what the problem is. It says he was allegedly doing donuts on State Route 56 near his home with a child in the backseat of the car.
Oh, good.
He is no longer on the team. I am calling it now. He just, like, why do you do this? I didn't even hear about this. But does anybody really care?
No.
What did he do for the Chiefs?
He caught a couple balls.
He has some chips named after him. So
Yeah,
apparently the brand will be sold. He is no longer the heir apparent to the family name. But it looks like they're just trying to talk to him. The one cop is massaging his shoulders, telling him it's going to be okay. Oh, and there's another large man getting out of the car with his hands up.
Is that the
pointing
child?
Towards the sky. No, if it's the child, he's 27 years old with a hat. No idea what's going on. So he's trying to mediate the situation. I'm doing a terrible job of narrating. This is all on the fly. But now Byron looks like he's crying or possibly laughing. The guy who came out of the car, and there's a third cop that enters the scene who is going to probably arrest the other guy for talking to the cops. This is absurd. Now, what I don't understand is I'm looking at the cop car in the back seat. They show Byron get into it. Why do they have cones in the back seat? Like traffic cones. To me, that's a conspiracy worth observing. Maybe it's because they have to sit on the cones? Is that the punishment?
Probably. It's not comfortable. Can't put your seatbelt on. This
is going off the rails. The Bears suck.
The Bears suck.
I'll redirect back to the conversation.
Yes. I mean, that's really the whole point here. My conspiracy there is he did this on purpose because he did not want to be a Bear.
Maybe we can try to get our first guest. I can get my confirmed Bears fan.
Bring him in
on the show.
How do you
And we can see what he thinks.
Yeah, that would be good to get that in before the season because I don't know how you do it. It's a historic franchise, but damn. But anyways, that'll do it. If you want to read our full synopsis of our power rankings, we have blurbs for every single team. That will be coming out soon. Check out the link in the description. It'll be on Medium. You can find it on our Twitter. We'll just post it everywhere so you can find the damn thing. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Hoping to get football back here at some point. We have a little bit of a waiting period, but in that meantime, we have the NHL playoffs going on. We have the NBA playoffs going on. So you can do some prop betting with Monkey Knife Fight. Use our link in the description and get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100 and do some easy prop betting while you wait for football.
Yeah, I totally agree. side note, the Canadians got the number 1 pick next year for the lottery. So if you want to make a stupid fucking bet and pick them to win the Stanley Cup next year, go ahead and do that. Probably not going to happen. But if you'd also rather spend your money more wisely and invest in your furry friend who probably barks at you during the podcast, I highly recommend BarkBox. You can get a monthly subscription. They'll deliver dog treats and dog toys directly to your door. And they will be things that you can distract your dog with when you're trying to do a podcast. So I obviously use it all the time. That's why you haven't heard her since that episode earlier. And it's great. So I highly recommend it.
Thanks. We'll catch you next time.